Good morning, everybody. It's Nick, and it is day 3202. Do you want to hear a story? Today we're doing story reading. It was brought to my attention as such a short story exists as is called The Eye of Argon, which is famously one of the most ridiculed short stories in the history of science fiction. It was published over 50 years ago. It's often read at cons. Um, Written by a 16-year-old and published in a fanzine originally. I had one edition of it, but since then I have found a different version, which is the competitive version. Uh, and we're gonna play by the rules of the competitive version, which is basically I'm gonna sit here and try and read this as straight-faced as I possibly can. Are there other rules? Let's look. We want which will lay here. Yeah. So it's called the Eye of Argon. We're not gonna do this proofreader shit. Um, da 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 da. If the text contains a typographical error, i.e., swiveled instead of swiveled, the reader must read the word as written, not the correct word. In the case of a word that cannot be pronounced or has no self-evident pronunciation under the usual rules of English, a good faith effort will be accepted. Um, No scores kept. There are no winners. The convention is that Grigner is, I believe, our main character, and it is pronounced Grigner. So here we go. I'm not going to laugh this entire time. The Eye of Argon by Jim Thice. The weather-beaten trail wound ahead into the dust-racked climes of the barren land which dominates large portions of the Norgolian Empire. Age-worn hoofprints smothered by the sifting sands of time shone dully against the dust-splattered crust of earth. The tireless sun cast its parching rays of incandescence from overhead, halfway through its daily revolution. Small rodents scampered about, occupying themselves in the daily accomplishments of their dismal lives. Dust sprayed over 3 heaving mounts in blinding clouds, while they bore the burdensome cargoes of their struggling overseers. "Prepare to embrace your creators in the Stygian haunts of hell, barbarian," gasped the first soldier. "Only after you've kissed the fleeting stead of death, wretch," returned Gregner. A sweeping blade of flashing steel riveted from the massive barbarian's hide-enameled shield as his rippling right arm thrust forth, sending a steel-shod blade to the hilt in the soldier's vital organs. The disemboweled mercenary crumpled from his saddle and sank to the clouded sward, sprinkling the parched dust with crimson droplets of escaping life fluid. The enthused barbarian swiveled about, his shock of fiery red hair tossing robustly in the humid air currents as he faced the attack of the defeated soldier's fellow in arms. "Damn you, barbarian!" shrieked the soldier as he observed his comrade in death. A gleaming scimitar smote a heavy blow against the renegade's spiked helmet, bringing a heavy cloud over the Ecordion's misting brain. Shaking off the effects of the pounding blow to his head, Grigner brought down his scarlet-streaked edge against the soldier's crudely forged hauberk, clanging harmlessly to the left side of his opponent. The soldier's steed whinnied as he directed the horse back from the driving blade of the barbarian. Grigner leashed his mount forward as the hoarsely piercing battle cry of his wilderness-bred race resounded from his grinding lungs. A twirling blade bounced harmlessly from the mighty thief's buckler as his rolling right arm cleft upward, sending a foot of blinding steel ripping through the Cimmerian's exposed gullet. A gasping gurgle from the soldier's writhing mouth as he tumbled to the golden sand at his feet and wormed agonizingly in his deathbed. Grigner's emerald green orbs glared lustfully at the wallowing soldier struggling before his chestnut-swirled mount. His scowling voice reverberated over the dying form in a tone of mocking mirth. "You city-bred dogs should learn not to antagonize your better." Reining his weary mount ahead, Grigner resumed his journey to the Norregolian city of Gorzam, hoping to discover wine, women, and adventure to boil the wild blood coursing through his savage veins. The trek to Gorzom was forced upon Grignir when the soldiers of Kryn were leashed upon him by a faithless concubine he had wooed. His scandalous activities throughout the Cimmerian city had unleashed throngs of havoc and uproar among its refined patricians, leading them to tack a heavy reward over his head. He had barely managed to escape through the back entrance of the inn he had been guzzling in as a squad of soldiers pounced upon him. After spilling a spout of blood from the leader of the mercenaries as he dismembered one of the officer's arms, he retreated to his mount to make his way towards Gorzom, rumored to contain hordes of plunder and many young wenches for any man who has the backbone to wrest them away. Hi, Luke. Chapter 2. This is easy. This is going to be easy. Although, what did they call it? Life fluid? Life fluid almost got me. Yeah, droplets of escaping life fluid. Arriving after dusk in Gorzom, Grignir descended down a dismal alley, reining his horse before a beaten tavern. The red-haired giant strode into the dimly lit hostelry reeking of foul odors and cheap wine. The air was heavy with choking fumes spewing from smoldering torches encased within Thedin's earthen-packed walls. Tables were clustered with groups of drunken thieves and cutthroats, tossing dice or making love to willing prostitutes. Eyeing a slender female crouched alone at a nearby bench, Grignir advanced, wishing to wholesomely occupy his time. The flickering torches cast weird shafts of luminescence dancing over the half-naked harlot of his choice, her stringy orchid twines of hair swaying gracefully over the lithe, opaque nose as she raised a half-drained mug to her pale red lips. Glancing upward, the alluring complexion noted the stalwart giant as he rapidly approached. A faint glimmer sparked from the pair of deep blue ovals of the amorous female as she motioned towards Grignir, enticing him to join her. The barbarian seated himself upon a stool at the wench's side, exposing his body, naked save for a loincloth brandishing a long steel broadsword, an iron spiraled battle helmet, and thick leather sandals to her unobstructed view. "Thou hast need to occupy your time, barbarian?" questioned the female. "Only if something worth offering is within my reach," stated Grignir, as his hands crept to embrace the tempting female, who welcomed them with open willingness. "From where do you come, barbarian, and by what are you called?" gasped the complying wench, as Grignir smothered her lips with the blazing touch of his flaming mouth. The engrossed Titan ignored the queries of the inquisitive female, pulling her towards him and crushing her sagging nipples to his yearning chest. Without struggle, she gave in, winding her soft arms around the harshly bronze hide of Grignir's corded shoulder blades as his calloused hands caressed her firm, protruding breasts. "You make love well, wench," admitted Grignir as he reached for the vessel of potent wine his charge had been quaffing. A flying foot caught the mug Grignir had taken hold of, sending its blood-red contents sloshing over a flickering crescent, leashing tongues of bright orange flame to the foot-trodden floor. "Remove yourself, sirrah. The wench belongs to me," blabbered a drunken soldier, too far consumed by the influences of his virile brew to take note of the superior size of his adversary. Grignir lithely bounded from the startled female, his face lit up to an ashen red ferocity, and eyes locked in a searing feral blaze toward the swaying soldier. "To hell with you, braggart!" bellowed the angered Ecordian as he hefted his finely honed broadsword. The staggering soldier clumsily reached towards the pommel of his dangling sword, but before his hands ever touched the oaken hilt, a silvered flash was slicing the heavy air. The thews of the savage's lashing right arm bulged from the glistening bronzed hide as his blade bit deeply into the soldier's neck, loping off the confused head of his senseless tormentor. With a nauseating thud, the severed oval toppled to the floor as the segregated torso of Grignir's bovine antagonist swayed, then collapsed in a pool of swirled crimson. In the confusion, the soldiers' fellows confronted Grigner with unsheathed cutlasses, directed toward the latter's scowling makeup. "The slut should have picked his quarry more carefully," roared the victor in a mocking baritone growl, as he wiped his dripping blade on the prostrate form and returned it to its scabbard. "The fool should have shown more prudence. However, you shall rue your actions while rotting in the pits," stated one of the sprawled soldier's comrades. Grigner's head began to remove his blade from its leather housing, but retarded the motion in face of the blades waving before his face. "Dismiss your hand from the hilt, Barbarbian, or you shall find a foot of steel sheathed in your gizzard." Grigner weighed his position, observing his plight, whereupon he took the soldier's advice as the only logical choice. To attempt to hack his way from his present predicament could only warrant certain death. He was of no mind to bring upon his own demise if an alternate path presented itself. The will to necessitate his life forced him to yield to the superior force in hopes of a moment of carelessness later upon the part of his captors in which he could effect a more plausible means of escape. "You may steady your arms. I will go without a struggle." "Your decision is a wise one, yet perhaps you would have been better off had you forced to death." The soldier's mouth wrinkled to a sadistic grin of knowing mirth as he prodded his prisoner on with his sword point. After an indiscriminate period of marching through slinking alleyways and dim, moonlighted streets, the procession confronted a massive seraglio. The palace area was surrounded by an iron grating, with a lush garden upon all sides. The group was admitted through the gilded gateway, and Grigner was led along a stone pathway bordered by plush vegetation lustfully enhanced by the moon's shimmering rays. Upon reaching the palace, the group was granted entrance, and after several minutes of explanation, led through several winding corridors to a richly draped chamber. Confronting the group was a short, stocky man seated upon a golden throne. Tapestries of richly draped regal blue silk covered all walls of the chamber, while the steps leading to the throne were plated with sparkling white ivory. The man upon the throne had a naked wench seated at each of his arms, and a trusted adviser seated in back of him. At each corner of the chamber, a guard stood at attention, with upraised pikes in their hands, golden chainmail adorning their torsos, and barred helmets emitting scarlet plumes enshrouding their heads. The man rose from his throne to the dais surrounding it. His plush turquoise robe dangled loosely from his chunky frame. The soldiers surrounding Grigner fell to their knees with heads bowed to the stone masonry of the floor in fearful dignity to their sovereign liege. "Explain the purpose of this intrusion upon my chateau." "Your Serenity, resplendent in noble grandeur, we've brought you this yokel before you," the soldier gestured toward Grigner, "for the redress of your all-knowing wisdom in judgment regarding his fate." "Down on your knees, lout, and pay proper homage to your sovereign," commanded the pudgy noble of Grigner. "By the surly beard of Mrifk, Grigner kneels to no man," scowled the massive barbarian. "You dare to deal this blasphemous act to me? You are indeed brave, stranger, yet your valor smacks of foolishness." "I find you to be the only fool, sitting upon your pompous throne, enhancing the rolling flabs of your belly in the midst of your elaborate luxury and—" The soldier standing at Grigner's side smote him heavily in the face with the flat of his sword, cutting short the harsh words and knocking his battered helmet to the masonry with an echoing clang. The paunchy noble's sagging round face flushed suddenly pale, then pastily lit up to a lustrous cherry-red radiance. His lip trembled with malicious rage while emitting a muffled, sibilant gibberish. His sagging flabs rolled like a tub of upset jelly, then compressed as he sucked in his gut in an attempt to conceal his softness. The prince regained his statue, then spoke to the soldiers surrounding Grigner, his face conforming to an ugly expression of sadistic humor. "Take this uncouth heathen to the vault of misery, and be sure that his agonies are long and drawn out before death can release him." As you wish, sire. Your command shall be heeded immediately, answered the soldier on the right of Grigner as he stared into the barbarian's seemingly unaffected face. The advisor seated in the back of the noble slowly rose and advanced to the side of his master, motioning the wenches seated at his sides to remove themselves. He lowered his head and whispered to the noble, "Eminence, the punishment you have decreed will cause much misery to this scum, yet it will last only a short time. Then release him to a land beyond the sufferings of the human body. Why not mellow him in one of the subterranean vaults for a few days, then send him to life labor in one of your buried mines? To one such as he, a life spent in the confinement of the Stygian pits will be an infinitely more appropriate and lasting torture." The noble cupped his drooping double chin in the folds of his brimming palm, meditating for a moment upon the rationality of the counselor's words, then raised his shaggy brown eyebrows and turned toward the advisor, eyes aglow. "As always, Agfund, you speak with great wisdom. Your words ring of great knowledge concerning the nature of one such as he," saith the king. The noble turned toward the prisoner with a noticeable shimmer reflecting in his frog-like eyes, and his lips contorting to a greasy grin. "I've decided to void my previous decree. The prisoner shall be removed to one of the palace's underground vaults. There he shall stay until I have decided that he has sufficiently simmered, whereupon he is to be allowed to spend the remainder of his days at labor in one of my mines." Upon hearing this, Grigner realized that his fate would be far less merciful than death to one such as he, who's used to roaming the countryside at will. A life of confinement would be more than his body and mind could stand up to. This type of life would be immeasurably worse than death. "I shall never understand the ways if your twisted civilization. I simply defend my honor and am condemned to life confinement by a pig who sits on his royal ass wooing whores and knowing nothing of the affairs of the land he imagines to rule," lectures Grignir. "Enough of this. Away with the slut before I loose my control." Seeing the peril of his position, Grigner searched for an opening. Crushing prudence to the sward, he plowed into the soldier at his left arm, taking hold of his sword, and bounding to the dais supporting the prince before the startled guards could regain their composure. Agfund leaped Grigner and his sire, but found a sword blade permeating the length of his ribs before he could loose his weapon. The counselor slumped to his knees as Grigner slid his crimsoned blade from Agfund's rib cage. The fat prince stood undulating in insurmountable fear before the edge of the fiery-maned comet, his flabs of jellied blubber pulsating to and fro in ripples of flowing terror. "Where's your wisdom and power now, your majesty?" growled Grigner. The prince went rigid as Grigner... Why am I not scrolling anymore? The prince went rigid as Grigner discerned him, glazing over his shoulder. He swived to note the cause of the noble's attention, raised his sword over his head, and prepared to leash a vicious downward cleft, but fell short as the haft of a steel-rimed pike clashed against his unguarded skull. Then, blackness and solitude, silence enshrouding and ever peaceful, reigned supreme. "Before me, sirrah, before me as always, ha 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 ha," nobly cackled. I'm not sure what this is supposed to mean. The noble cackled? Chapter 3. Consciousness returned to Grigner in the stigmatic pools as his mind gradually cleared of the cobwebs cluttering its inner recesses, yet the Stygian cloud of charcoal ebony remained, an incompatible shield of blackness enhanced by the bleak absence of sound. Grigner's muddled brain reeled from the shock of the blow he had received to the base of his skull. The events leading to his predicament were slow to filter back to him. He dickered with the notion that he was dead and had descended, or sunk, however it may be, to the shadowed land beyond the aperture of the grave. but rejected this hypothesis when his memory sifted back within his grips. This was not the land of the dead. It was something infinitely more precarious than anything the grave could offer. Death promised an infinity of peace, not the finite misery of an inactive life of confined torture, forever concealed from the life-bearing shafts of the beloved rising sun. The orb that had been before taken for granted, yet now cherished above all else. To be forever refused further glimpses of the snow-capped summits of the land of his birth, never again to witness the thrill of plundering unexplored lands beyond the crest of a bleeding horizon, and perhaps worst of all, the denial to ever again encompass the lustful excitement of caressing the naked curves of the body of a trim yound wench. This was indeed one of the buried chasms of hell concealed within the inner depths of the palace's despised interior, a fearful ebony chamber devised to drive to the brinks of insanity the minds of the unfortunately condemned, through the inapt solitude of a limbo of listless, dreary silence. Chapter 3.5. A tightly rung elliptical circle or torches cast their wavering shafts prancing morbidly over the smooth surface of a rectangular ridged altar. Expertly chiseled forms of grotesque gargoyles graced the oblique rim protuberating the length of the grim orifice of death, staring forever ahead into nothingness in complete ignorance of the bloody rites enacted in their presence. Brown flaking stains decorated the golden surface of the ridge surrounding the altar, which banked to a small slit at the lower right-hand corner of the altar. The slit stood above a crudely pounded pail, which had several silver meshed chalices hanging at its sides. Dangling at the rim of a golden mallet, the handle of which was engraved with images of twisted faces and groved at its far end with slots designed for a snug hand grip. The head of the mallet was slightly larger than a clenched fist and shaped into a smooth oval mass. Encircling the marble altar was a congregation of leering shaman, eerie chants of a bygone age, originating unknown eons before the memory of man, were being uttered from the buried recesses of the acolytes' deep lings. Orange paint was smeared in generous globules over the tops of the priests' wrinkled shaven scalps, while golden rings projected from the lobes of their pink ears. Ornate robes of loose Kior purple satin enclosed their bulging torsos, attached around their waists with silvered silk lashes latched with ebony buckles in the shape of Moreau's misshaped skulls. Dangling around their necks were oval-fashioned medallions held by thin gold chains, featuring in their centers blood-red rubies which resembled crimson fetish eyeballs. Cushioning their bare feet were plush red felt slippers with pointed golden spikes projecting from their tips. Situated in front of the altar and directly adjacent to the copper pail was a massive jade idol, a misshaped, hideous bust of the shaman's pagan deity. The shimmering green idol was placed in a sitting posture on an ornately carved golden throne raised upon a round, ivory-plated dais, it bulging arms and webbed hands resting on the padded arms of the seat. Its head was entwined in golden snake-like coils hanging over its oblong ears, which tapered off to thin hollow points. Its nose was a bulging triangular mass, sunken in at its sides with gaping nostrils. Dramatic beneath the nostrils was a twisted, shaggy-lipped mouth, giving the impression of a slavering, sadistic grimace. At the foot of the heathen deity, a slender, pale-faced female, naked but for a golden jeweled harness enshrouding her huge outcropping breasts, supporting her long silver laces which extended to her thigh, stood before the pearl-white field with noticeable shivers traveling up and down the length of her exquisitely molded body. Her delicate lips trembled beneath soft, narrow hands as she attempted to conceal herself from the piercing stare of the ambivalent idol. Glaring directly down towards her was the stony, cycloptic face of the bloated deity. Gaping from its single oblong socket was scintillating, many-faceted scarlet emerald, a brilliant gem seeming to possess a life all of its own, a priceless, gleaming stone capable of domineering the wealth of conquering empires. The Eye of Argon. Chapter 4. All knowledge of measuring time had escaped Grigner. When a person is deprived of the sun, moon, and stars, he loses all conception of time as he had previously understood it. It seemed as if years had passed if time were being measured by terms of misery and mental anguish, yet he estimated that his stay had only been a few days in length. He has slept 3 times and had been fed 5 times since his awakening in the crypt. However, when the actions of the body are restricted, its needs are also affected. The need for nourishment and slumber are directly proportional to the functions the body has performed, meaning that when free and active, Grignr may have become hungry every 6 hours and witnessed the desire for sleep every 15 hours, whereas in his present condition he may encounter the need for food every 10 hours and the want for rest every 20 hours. All methods he had before depended upon were extinct in the dismal pit. Hence, he may have been imprisoned for 10 minutes or 10 years. He did not know, resulting in a disheartened emotion deep within his being. The food, if you can honor the moldering lumps of fetid mush to that extent, was borne to him by 2 guards who opened a portal at the top of his enclosure and shoved it to him in wooden bowls, retrieving the food and water bowels from his previous meal at the same time, after which they threw back the bolts on the iron latch and returned to their other duties. Since deprived of all other means of nourishment, Grignr was impelled to eat the tainted slop in order to ward off the pangs of starvation. Though as he stuffed it into his mouth with his filthy fingers and struggled to force it down his throat, he imagined it was that which had been spurned by the hounds stationed at various segments of the palace. There was little in the barren vault that could occupy his body or mind. He'd paced out the length and width of the enclosure time and time again and tested every granite slab which consisted the walls of the prison in hopes of finding a hidden passage to freedom, all of which was to no avail other than to keep him busy and distract his mind from wandering to thoughts of what he believed was his future. He'd memorized the number of strides from one end to the other of the cell, and knew the exact number of slabs which made up the bleak dungeon. Numerous schemes were introduced and alternately discarded in turn as they succored to unravel to him no means of escape which stood the slightest chance of success. Anguish continued to mount as his means of occupation were rapidly exhausted. Suddenly, without no tive, he was routed from his contemplations as he detected a faint scratching sound at the end of the crypt opposite him. The sound seemed to be caused by something trying to scrape away at the granite blocks of the floor the enclosure consisted of, the sandy scratching of something like an animal's claws. Grignr gradually groped his way to the other end of the vault, carefully feeling his way along with his hands ahead of him. When a few inches from the wall, a loud, penetrating squeal and the scampering of small padded feet reverberated from the walls of the roughly hewn chamber. Grignr threw his hands up to shield his face and flung himself backwards upon his buttocks. A fuzzy form bounded to his hairy chest, burying its talons in his flesh while gnashing towards his throat with its grinding white teeth, its sour, fetid breath scorching the squirming barbarian's dilating nostrils. Grignr grappled with the lashing flexor muscles of the repugnant body of a gargantuan brown-hided rat, striving to hold its razor teeth from his juicy jugular as its beady gray organs of sight glazed into the flaring emeralds of its prey. Taking hold of the rodent around its lean, growling stomach with both hands, Grignr pried it from his crimson-rent breast, removing small patches of flayed flesh from his chest in the motion between the squalid black claws of the starving beast. Holding the rodent at arm's length, he cupped his right hand over its frothing face, contorting his fingers into a vice-like fist over the quivering head. Retaining his grips on the rat, Grignr flexed his outstretched arms while slowly twisting his right hand clockwise and his left hand counterclockwise motion. The rodent let out a tortured squall, drawing scarlet as it violently dug its foam-flecked fangs into the barbarian's sweating palm, causing his face to contort to an ugly grimace as he cursed beneath his breath. With a loud crack, the rodent's head parted from its squirming torso, sending out a sprinkling shower of crimson gore, and trailing a slimy string of disjointed vertebrae, snapped trachea, esophagus, and jugular, disjointed hyoid bone, moroids, purpled stretched hide, and blood-seared muscles. Flinging the broken body to the floor, Grigner shook his blood-streaked hands and wiped them against his thigh until dry, then wiped the blood that had showered his face and from his eyes. Again sitting himself upon the jagged floor, he prepared to once more revamp his glum meditations. He told himself that as long as he still breathed the gust of life through his lungs, hope was not lost. He told himself this, but found it hard to comprehend in his gloomy surroundings. Yet he was still alive, his bulging sinews at their peak of marvel, his struggling mind floating in a myriad of impressed excellence of thought. Plot after plot sifted through his mind in energetic contemplations. Then it hit him. Minutes may have passed in silent thought, or days, he could not tell, but he stumbled at last upon a plan that he considered as holding a slight margin of plausibility. He might die in the attempt, but he knew he would not submit without a final bloody struggle. It was not a foolproof plan, yet it built up a store of renewed vortexed energy in his overwrought soul. Though he might perish in the execution of the escape, he would still be escaping the life of infinite torture in store for him. Either way, he would still cheat the gloating prince of the succored revenge his sadistic mind craved so dearly. The guards would soon come to bear him off to the prince's buried mines of dread, giving him the sought-after opportunity to execute his newly formulated plan. Groping his way along the rough floor, Grigner finally found his tool in a pool of congealed gore, the carcass of the decapitated rodent, the tool that the very filth he had been sentenced to spawned. When the time came for action, he would have to be prepared, so he set himself to rending the sticky hulk in grim silence, searching by the touch of his fingertips for the lever to freedom. Chapter 5. "Up to the altar and be done with it, wench," ordered a fidgeting shaman as he gave the female a grim stare accompanied by the wrinkling of his lips to a mirthful grin of delight. The girl burst into a slow, steady whimper, stooping shakily to her knees and cringing woefully from the priest with both arms wound snake-like around the bulging jade shin rising before her scantily attired figure. Her face was redly inflamed from the salty flow of tears spouting from her glassy, dilated eyeballs. With short, heavy footfalls, the priest approached the female, his piercing stare never wavering from her quivering young countenance. Halting before the terrified girl, he projected his arm outward and motioned her to arise with an upward movement of his hand. The girl's whimpering increased slightly, and she sunk closer to the floor rather than arising. The flickering torches outlined her trim build with a weird, ornate glow as it cast a ghostly shadow dancing in horrid waves of splendor over smoothly worn whiteness of the marble-hewn altar. The shaman's lips curled back farther, exposing a set of blackened, decaying molders which transformed his slovenly grin into a wide, greasy arc of sadistic mirth, and alternately interposed into the female a strong sensation of stomach-curdling nausea. "Have it as you will, female," gloated the enhanced priest as he bent over at the waist, projecting his ape-like arms forward, and clasped the female's slender arms with his hairy, round fists. With an inward surge of his biceps, he harshly jerked the trembling girl to her feet and smothered her salty, wet cheeks with the moldy touch of his decrepit, dull red lips. The vile stench of the shaman's hot, fetid breath overcame the nauseated female with a deep soul-searing sickness, causing her to wrench her head backwards and regurgitate a slimy, orange-white stream of swelling gore over the richly woven purple robe of the enthused acolyte. The priest's lips trembled with a malicious rage as he removed his callous paws from the girl's arms and replaced them with tightly around her undulating neck, shaking her violently to and fro. The girl gasped a tortured groan from her clamped lungs, her sea-blue eyes bulging forth from damp sockets. Cocking her right foot backwards, she leashed it desperately outwards with the strength of a demon possessed, lodging her sandaled foot squarely between the shaman's testicles. The startled priest released his crushing grip, crimping his body over at the waist overlooking his recessed belly, wide open in a deep chasm. His face flushed to a rose-red shade of crimson, eyelids fluttering wide with eyeballs protruding blindly outwards from their sockets to their outmost perimeters, while his lips quivered wildly about, allowing an agonized wallow to gust forth as his breath billowed from burning lungs. His hands reached out, clutching his urinary gland as his knees wobbled rapidly about for a few seconds, then buckled, causing the ruptured shaman to collapse in an egg-huddled mass to the granite pavement, rolling helplessly about in his agony. The pathetic screeches of the shaman groveling in dejected misery upon the hand-hewn granite-laid pavement, worn smooth by countless hours of arduous sweat and toil, a welter of ichor oozing through his clenched hands, attracted the perturbed attention of his comrades from their foetid ululations. The actions of this rebellious wench bespoke the credence of an unheard-of sacrilege. Never before in a lost maze of untold eons had a chosen one dared to demonstrate such blasphemy in the face of the cult's idolic deity. The girl cowered in unreasoning terror, helpless in the face of the emblazoned acolyte's rage, her orchid-tussled face smothered betwixt her bulging bosom as she shut her curled lash tightly, hoping to open them and find herself awakening from a morbid nightmare. Yet the hand of destiny decreed her no such mercy. The antagonized pack of leering shaman converging tensely upon her prostrate form were entangled all too lividly in the grim web of reality. Shuddering from the clammy touch of the shaman as they grappled with her supple form, hands wrenching at her slender arms and legs in all directions, her bare body being molested in the midst of a labyrinth of orange smudges, purpled satin, and mangled skulls, shadowed in an eerie crimson glow, her confused head reeled, then clouded in a mist of enshrouding ebony as she lapsed beneath the protective sheet of unconsciousness to a land peach and resign. Enigmatic. Chapter 6. It is a lot of adjectives. That last one of those paragraphs had like a double, I don't know what to call it, like inside the sentence, double injected sentence. And I'm actually really struggling. The thing I'm struggling the most with is correctly reading the typos, because that's part of the game. Chapter 6. "Take hold of this rope," said the first soldier, "and climb out from your pit, slut. Your presence is requested in another far deeper hellhole." Grigner slipped his right hand to his thigh, concealing a small opaque object beneath the folds of the G-string wrapped about his waist. Brine wells swelled in Grigner's cold, jade, squinting eyes, which, grown accustomed to the gloom of the Stygian pools of ebony engulfing him, were bedazzled and blinded by flickering radiance cast forth by the second soldier's resin torch. Tightly gripped in the second soldier's right hand, opposite the intermittent torch, was a large double-edged axe, a long leather-wound oaken handle transfixing the center of the weapon's iron head. Adorning the torsos of both of the sentries were thin yet sturdy hauberks, the breastplates of which were woven of tightly hemmed twines of reinforced silver braiding. Cupping the soldiers' feet were thick leather sandals, wound about their shins to 2 inches below their knees. Wrapped about their waists were wide satin girdles, with slender bladed poniards dangling loosely from them, the hilts of which featured scarlet-encrusted gems. Resting upon the manes of their heads and reaching midway to their brows were smooth copper morions. Spiraling to the lower portion of the helmet were short, upcurved silver spikes, while a golden hump spired from the top of each bassinet. Beneath their chins, wound around their necks and draping their clad shoulders, dangled regal purple satin cloaks, which flowed midway to the soldiers' feet. Hand over hand, feet braced against the dank walls of the enclosure, huge Grigner ascended from the moldering depths of the forlorn abyss. His swelled limbs, stiff due to the boredom of a timeless inactivity, compounded by the musty atmosphere and jagged granite protuberance against his body, craved for action. The opportunity now presenting itself served the purpose of oiling his rusty joints and honing his dulled senses. He braced himself, facing the second soldier. The sentry's stature was wildly exaggerated in the glare of the flickering crescent cupex in his right fist. His eyes were wide open in a slightly slanted, owlish glaze, enhanced in their sinister intensity by the hawkbill curve of his nose and pale yellow peak of his cheeks. "Place your hands behind your back," said the second soldier as he raised his axe over his right shoulder blade and casted a wavering glance. "We must bind your wrists to parry any attempts at escape. Be sure to make the knot a stout one, Broig. We wouldn't want our guest to take leave of our guidance." Broig grasped Grigner's left wrist and reached for the barbarian's right wrist. Grigner wrenched his right arm free and swiveled to face Broig, reaching beneath his loincloth with his right hand. He sentry grappled at his girdle for the sheathed dagger, but recoiled short of his intentions as Grigner's right arm swept to his gorge. The soldier went limp, his bobbing eyes rolling beneath fluttering eyelids, a deep welt across his spouting gullet. Without lingering to observe the result of his effort, Grigner dropped to his knees. The second soldier's axe cleft over Grignel's head in a bulge of silvered ferocity, severing several scarlet locks from his scalp. Coming to rest in his fellow's stomach, the iron head crashed through mail and flesh with splintering force, spilling a pool of crimsoned entrails over the granite paving. Before the sentry could wrench his axe free from his comrade's carcass, he found Grigner's massive hands clasped about his throat, choking the life from his clamped lungs. With a zealous grunt, the Ecordian flexed his tightly corded biceps, forcing the grim-faced soldier to one knee. The sentry plunged his right fist into Grigner's face, digging his grimy nails into the barbarian's flesh. Ejaculating a curse through rasping teeth, Grigner surged the bulk of his weight forward, bowling the besieged soldier over upon his back. The sentry's arms collapsed to his thigh, shuddering convulsively, his bulging eyes staring blindly from a bloated, cherry-red face. Rising to his feet, Grigner shook the blood from his eyes, ruffling his surly red mane as a brush fire swaying to the nighttime breeze. Stooping over the sprawled corpse of the first soldier, Grigner retrieved a small white object from a pool of congealing gore. Snorting a gusty billow of mirth, he once more concealed the tiny object beneath his loincloth, the tediously honed pelvis bone of the broken rodent. Returning his attention toward the second soldier, Grigner turned to the task of attiring his limbs. To move about freely through the dim recesses of the castle would require the grotesque garb of its soldiery. Utilizing the silence and stealth acquired in the untamed climbs of his childhood, Grigner slinked through twisting corridors and winding stairways, lighting his way with the confiscated torch of his dispatched guardian. Knowing where his steps were leading to, Grigner meandered aimlessly in search of an exit from the chateau's dim confines. The wild blood coursing through his veins yearned for the undefiled freedom of the livid wilderness lands. Coming upon a fork in the passage, he shrieked. Voices accompanied by clinking footfalls discerned to his sensitive ears from the left corridor. Wishing to avoid contact, Grigner veered to the right passageway. If accosted as to the purpose of his presence, his barbarous accent would reveal his identity, being that his attire was not that of the castle's mercenary troops. In grim silence, Grigner treaded down the dingily lit corridor, a stalking panther creeping warily along on padded feet. After an interminable period of wandering through the dull corridors, no gaps to break the monotony of the cold gray walls, Grigner espied a small winding stairway. Descending the flight of arced granite slabs to their posterior, Grigner was confronted by a short haleway leading to a tall arched wooden doorway. Halting before the teeming portal, Grigner rests his shaggy head sideways against the barrier. Detecting no sounds from within, he grasped the looped metal handle of the door, his arms surging with a tremendous effort of bulging muscles, yet the door would not budge. Retrieving his axe from where he had sheathed it beneath his girdle, he hefted it in his mighty hands with an appeased grunt, and wedging one of its blackened edges into the crack between the portal and its iron-rimmed sill, bracing his sandaled right foot against the roughly hewn wall, teeth tightly clenched, Grigner apple-levered the oaken haft, employing it as a lever whereby to pry open the barrier. The leather-wound hilt bending to its utmost limits of endurance, the massive portal swung open with a grating of snapped latch and rusty iron hinges. Glancing about the dust-swirled room in the gloomily dancing glare of his flickering cresset, Grigner eyed evidences of the enclosure being nothing more than a forgotten storeroom. Miscellaneous articles required for the maintenance of a castle were piled in disorganized heaps at infrequent intervals toward the wall opposite the barbarian's piercing stare. Utilizing long, bounding strides, Grigner paced his way over to the mounds of supplies to discover if any articles of value were contained within their midst. Detecting a faint clinking sound, Grigner sprawled to his left with the speed of a striking cobra, landing harshly upon his back, torch and axe loudly clattering to the floor in a morass of sparks and flame. A elm-woven board leaped from collapsed flooring, clashing against the jagged flooring and spewing a shower of orange and yellow sparks over Grigner's startled face. Rising uneasily to his feet, the half-stunned Ecordian glared down at the gruesome arm of death he had unwittingly sprung. Mrifk! Is that a name? If not for his keen auditory organs and lighting steeled reflexes, Grigner would have been groping through the shadowed hell pits of the Grim Reaper. He had unknowingly stumbled upon an ancient, long-forgotten booby trap, a mistake which would have stunted the perusal of longevity of one less agile. A mechanism, similar in type to that of a miniature catapult, was concealed beneath two collapsible sections of granite flooring. The arm of the device was 4 feet long, boasting razor-like cleats at regular intervals along its face with which it was to skewer the luckless body of its would-be victim. Grigner had stepped upon a concealed catch which released a small metal latch beneath the two granite sections, causing them to fall inward, and thereby loose the spiked arm of death they precariously held in. Maybe? Or like a swear? I don't know. Partially out of curiosity and partially out of an inordinate fear of becoming a pincushion for a possible second trap, Grigner plunged his torch into the exposed gap in the floor. The floor of a second chamber stood out 7 feet below the glare. Tossing his torch through the aperture, Grigner grasped the side of an adjoining tile, dropping down. Glancing about the room, Grigner discovered that he had descended into the palace's mausoleum. Rectangular stone crypts cluttered the floor at evenly placed intervals. The tops of the enclosures were plated with thick layers of virgin gold, while the sides were plated with white ivory, at one time sparkling, but now grown dingy through the passage of the rays of all-encompassing Mother Time. Featured at the head of each sarcophagus in tarnished silver was an expugnatively carved likeness of its rotting inhabitant. A dingy atmosphere pervaded the air of the chamber, which sealed in the enclosure for an unknown period had grown thick and stale. Intermingling with the curdled currents was the repugnant stench of slowly moldering flesh, creeping ever slowly but surely through minute cracks in the numerous vaults. Due to the embalming of the bodies, their flesh decayed at a much slower rate than is normal, yet the nauseous odor was none the less repellent. Towering over Grigner's head was the trap he released. The mechanism of the miniaturized catapult was cluttered with mildew and cobwebs. Notwithstanding these relics of antiquity, its efficiency remained unimpinged. To the right of the trap wound a short stairway through a recession in the ceiling, a concealed entrance leading to the mausoleum for which the catapult had obviously been erected as a silent, relentless guardian. Climbing up the side of the device, Grigner set to the task of resetting its mechanism. In the event that a search was organized, it would prove well to leave no evidence of his presence open to wandering eyes. Besides, it might even serve to dwindle the size of an opposing force. Didn't he, fucking crowbar a door, 20 feet before this? He didn't reset that. Descending from his perch, Grigner was startled by a faintly muffled scream of horrified desperation. His hair prickled yawkishly in disorganized clumps along his scalp, as a cold danced along the length of his spinal cord. No moral/mortal barrier, human or otherwise, was capable of arousing the numbing sensation of fear inside of Grigner's smoldering soul. However, he was overwrought by the forces of the barbarian's instinctive fear of the supernatural. His mighty thews had always served to adequately conquer any tangible foe, but the intangible was something distant and terrible. Dim, horrifying tales passed by word of mouth over glimmering campfires and skins of wine had more than once served the purpose of chilling the marrowed core of his sturdy-limbed bones. Yet the scream contained a strangely human quality, unlike that which Grigner imagined would come from the lungs of a demon or spirit, making Grigner take short, nervous strides, advancing to the sarcophagus from which the sound was issuing. Clenching his teeth in an attempt to steel his jangled nerves, Grigner slid the engraved slab from the vault with a sharp rasp of grinding stone. Another long-drawn cry of terror-infested anguish met the barbarian, scoring like the shrill piping of a demented banshee, piercing the inner fibers of his superstitious brain with primitive dread, and awe. Stooping over to espy the tomb's contents, the glittering accordion's nostrils were singed by the scorching aroma of a moldering corpse, long shut up and fermenting. The same putrid scent which permeated the entire chamber, though multiplied to a much more concentrated dosage. The shriveled, leathery packet of crumbling bones and dried, flacking flesh offered no resistance, but remained in a fixed position of perpetual vigilance, watching over its dim abode from hollow, gaping sockets. The tortured cries were not coming from the tomb, but from some hidden depth below. Pulling the reeking corpse from its resting place, Grigner tossed it to the floor in a broken, mangled heap. Upon one side of the crypt's bottom was attached a series of tiny hinges, while running parallel along the opposite side of a convex railing-like protuberance, laid so as to appear as part of the interior surface of the sarcophagus. Raising the slab upon its bronze hinges, long removed from the gaze of human eyes, Grigner perceived a scene which caused his blood to smolder, not unlike bubbling molten lava. Directly below him was a whimpering female lay stretched upon a smooth-surfaced marble altar. A pack of grassy-faced shaman clustered around her in a tight circular formation. Crouched over the girl was a tall, pot-bellied priest, his face dominated by a disgusting, open-mouthed grimace of sadistic glee. Suspended from the acolyte's clenched right hand was a carven, oval-faced mallet, which he waved menacingly over the girl's shadowed face, an incoherent gibberish flowing from his grinning, thick-lipped mouth. In the face of the amorphous, broad-breeded female, stretching out alluringly before his gaping eyes, the universal whim of nature filing a plea of despair inside of his white-hot soul, Grigner acted in the only manner he could perceive. Giving vent to a hoarse, throat-rending battle cry, Grigner plunged into the midst of the startled shaman, torch simmering in his left hand and axe twirling in his right hand. A gaunt, skull-faced priest standing at the far side of the altar clutched desperately at his throat, coughing furiously in an attempt to catch his breath, lurching helplessly to and fro. The acolyte pitched headlong against the gleaming base of a massive jade idol, writhing agonizedly against the hideous image, foam flecking his chalk-white lips. The priest struggled helplessly, the victim of an epileptic seizure. Startled by the barbarians' stunning appearance, the chronic fit of their fellow, and the fear that Grigner might be the avant-garde of a conquering force dedicated to the cause of destroying their degenerated cult, the Saemen momentarily lost their composure. Giving vent to heedless pandemonium, the priests fell easy prey to Grigner's sweeping arc of crimsoned death and maiming destruction. The acolyte performing the sacrifice took a vicious blow to the stomach, hands clutching vitals and severed spinal cord as he sprawled over the altar. The disorganized priests lurched and staggered with split skulls, dismembered limbs, and spewing entrails before the enraged accordion's relentless onslaught. The howls of the maimed and dying reverberated against the walls of the tiny chamber, a chorus of hell-fraught despair as the granite floor ran red with blood. The entire chamber was encompassed in the heat of raw, savage butchery as Grigner luxuriated in the grips of a primitive, beastly bloodlust. Presently all went silent, save for the ebbing groans of the sinking shaman and Grigner's heaving breath accompanied by several gusty curses. The well had run dry. No more lambs remained for the slaughter. The rampaging stead of death having taken of Grigner for the moment, left the barbarian free to the exploitation of his other Perusials. Towering over his head was the misshaped image of the cult's hideous deity, Argon. The fantastic size of the idol in consideration of its being pure jade was enough to cause the senses of any man to stagger and reel, yet thus was not the case for the behemoth. He had paid only casual notice to this incredible fact, while riveting the whole of his attention upon the jewel protruding from the idol's sole socket, its masterfully cut faucets emitting blinding rays of hypnotizing beauty. After all, a man cannot slink from a heavily guarded palace while burdened down by the intense bulk of a squatting statue, providing, of course, that the idol can even be hefted, which in fact was beyond the reaches of Grigner's coursing stamina. On the other hand, the jewel, gigantic as it was, would not present a hindrance of any mean concern. "Help me, please. I can make it well worth your while," pleaded a soft, anguish-strewn voice wafting over Grigner's shoulders as he plucked the dull red emerald from its roots. Turning, Grigner faced the female that had lured him into this bloodbath, but whom had become all but forgotten in the heat of the battle. "You!" ejaculated the accordion in a pleased tone. "I thought that I'd seen the last of you at the tavern. But verily, I was mistaken." Grigner advanced into the grips of the female's entrancing stare, severing the golden chains that held her captive upon the altar's highly polished face of ornamental limestone. As Grigner lifted the girl from the altar, her arms wound dexterously about his neck, soft and smooth against his harsh exterior. "Art thou pleased that... Wait. Yeah, I am this woman. Art thou pleased that we have chanced to meet once again?" Grigner merely voiced a sighed grunt, returning the damsel's embrace while he smothered her trim, delicate lips between the coursing protrusions of his reeking maw. "Let us take leave of this wretched chamber," stated Grigner as he placed the female upon her feet. She swooned. Does this woman have a name? She swooned a moment. Oh, damn, I laughed. Oh, I lose. She swooned a moment, causing Grigner to give her support, then regained her stance. Art thou able to find your way through the accursed passages of this castle?" "Mrifk! Every one of the corridors of this damned place are identical." I was at one time a slave of Prince Agafim. His clammy touch sent a sour swill through my belly, but my efforts reaped a harvest. I gained the pig's liking, whereby he allowed me the freedom of the palace. It was through this means that I eventually managed to escape of the palace. It was a simple matter to seduce the sentry at the western gate. His trust found him with a dagger thrust his ribs, the wench stated whimsicorically. "What were you doing at the tavern whence I discovered you?" asked Grigner as he lifted the female through the opening into the mausoleum. "I had sought to lay low from the palace's guards as they conducted their search for me. The tavern was seldom frequented by the palace guards, and my identity was unknown to the common soldiers. It was through the disturbance that you caused that the palace guards were attracted to the tavern. I was dragged away shortly after you were escorted to the palace." "What are you called by, female?" "Carthena, daughter of Mincardos, Duke of Barwego, whose lands border along the northwestern fringes of Gorzam. I was paid as homage to Agafim upon his 38th year," husked the femme. "No. And I am called a barbarian," grunted Grigner in a disgusted tone. "Aye, the ways of your civilization are in many ways warped and distorted. But what is your calling?" she queried, bustily. "Grigner of Ecoria." "Ah, I have heard vaguely of Ecordia. It is the hill country to the far east of the Norogolian Empire. I have also heard Agafim curse your land more than once when his troops were routed in the unaccustomed mountains and gorges," saith she. "Aye, My people are not tarnished by petty luxuries and baubles. They remain fierce and unconquerable in their native climes. After reaching the hidden panel at the head of the stairway, Grignr was at a loss in regard to its operation. His fiercest heaves were as pebbles against burnished armor. Carthena depressed a small symbol included within the elaborate design upon the panel, whereupon it slowly slid into a cleft in the wall. How did you come to be the victim of those... How did you come to be the victim of those crazed shaman? Quested Grignr as he escorted Carthena through the piles of rummage on the left side of the trap. By Aphem's orders, I was thrust into a secluded cell to await his passing of sentence. By some means, the priest of Argon acquired a set of keys to the cell. They slew the guard placed over me and abducted me to the chamber in which you chanced to come upon the Skostik sacrifice. Their hellspawn cult demands a sacrifice once every 3 moons upon its full journey through the heavens. They were startled by your unannounced appearance through the fear that you had been sent by Agaphim. The prince would surely have submitted them to the most ghastly of tortures if he had ever discovered their unfaithfulness to Sargon, his bastard deity. Many of the partakers of the ritual were high nobles and high trustees of the inner palace. Agaphim's pitiless wrath would have been unparalleled. They have no more to fear of Agaphim now, bellowed Grignr in a deep, mirthful tone, a gleeful smirk upon his face. I've seen that they were delivered from his vengeance. Engrossed by Carthena's graceful stride and conversation, Grignr failed to take note of the footfalls rapidly approaching behind him. As he swung aside the arched portal linking the chamber with the corridors beyond, a maddened, bloodlusting screech reverberated from his eardrums. Seemingly utilizing the speed of thought, Grignr swiveled to face his unknown foe. With gaping eyes and widened jaws, Grignr raised his axe above his surly mane. But he was too late. Cliffhanger. It's been like an hour. My mouth is super dry. I'll drink this. I'm gonna just get up for a minute. I think chapter 7 might be the last chapter. Oh, no, there's also chapter 7.5, which is significantly longer. Oh, we got a long way to go. This is longer than I thought. What do we think it is? What's rapidly approaching? Yeah, it's, well, it's got a couple of leading pages, and I think it's trailing. It's like 25 pages, maybe? I'll be back. Stick around for the exciting conclusion to Eye of Argon.
When did this get here?
See you later, Jared. Bye.
Bye,
guys.
Okay. And now the conclusion of Eye of Argon. I already have so much to say about this. I can't wait to get wrapped up. I've been deliberately not commenting as we go because I've been trying to do the I don't know. Well, I'll say everything I have to say when we're done. Chapter 7. With wobbling knees and swimming head, the priest that had lapsed into an epileptic seizure rose unsteadily to his feet. While enacting his choking fit in writhing agony, the shaman was overlooked by Grigner. The barbarian had mistaken the seizure for the death throes of the acolyte, allowing the priest to avoid his stinging blade. The sight that met the priest's inflamed eyes nearly served to sprawl him upon the floor once more. The sacrificial sat it grim, blood-splattered silence all around him, broken only by the occasional yelps and howls of his maimed and butchered fellows. Above his head rose the hideous idol, its empty socket holding the shaman's unfurbished, infuriated gaze, his eyes turned to a stony glaze with the realization of the pillage and blasphemy. Due to his high susceptibility following the seizure, the priest was transformed into a raving maniac bent solely upon wreaking vengeance. With lips curled and quivering, a crust of foam dripping from them, the acolyte drew a long, wicked-looking, jewel-hilted scimitar from his silver girdle and fled through the aperture in the ceiling, uttering a faintly perceptible ceremonial gibberish. 7.5. A sweeping scimitar swung towards Grigner's head in a shadowed blur of motion. With axe raised over his head, Grigner prepared to parry the blow while gaping wide-eyed in open-mouthed perplexity. Suddenly, a sharp snap resounded behind the frothing shaman. The scimitar, halfway through its fatal sweep, dropped from a quivering, nerveless hand, clattering harmlessly to the stonage. Cutting his screech short with a bubbling, red-mouthed gurgle, the lacerated acolyte staggered under the pressure of the released springboard. After a moment of a hopeless struggling, the shaman buckled, sprawling face down in a widening pool of blood and entrails, his regal purple robe blending enhancingly with the swirling streams of crimson. "Mrifk! I thought I had killed the last of those dogs," muttered Grignir in a half-apathetic state. "Nay, Grignir, you doubtless grew careless while giving vent to your lusts, but let us not tarry any long lest we tax the fates. The paths leading to freedom will soon be barred. The wretch's cries must certainly have attracted unwanted attention," the wench mused. "By what direction shall we pursue our flight?" Up that stair and down the corridor a short distance is the concealed entrance to a tunnel seldom used by others than the prince, and known to few others save the palace's royalty. It is used mainly by the prince when he wishes to take leave of the palace in secret. It is not always in the prince's best interests to leave his chateau in public view. Even while under heavy guard, he's often assaulted by hurtling stones and rotting fruits. The commoners have little love for him, lectured the Nair lady. It is amazing that they would ever have left a pig like him become their ruler. I should imagine his people would rise up and crucify him like the dog he is. Alas, Grignir, it is not as simple as all that. His soldiers are well paid by him. So long as he keeps their wages up, they will carry out his damned wishes. The crude implements of the common folk would never stand up under an onslaught of forged blades and protective armor. They would be going to their own slaughter, stated Carthena to a confused but angered Grignir as they topped the stairway. Yet how can they bear to live under such oppression? I would sooner die beneath the sword than live under such a dog's command, added Grignir as the pair stalked down the hall in the direction opposite that in which Grignir had come. But all men are not of the same mold that you are born of. They choose to live as they are so as to save their filthy necks from the chopping block, returned Carthena in a disgusted tone as she cast an apprised glance towards the stalwart figure at her side, whose left arm was wound dexterously about her slim waist, his slowly waning torch casting their images in intermingling wisps as it dangled from his left hand. Presently, Carthena came upon the panel, concealed amongst the other granite slabs and discernible only by the burned-out cresset above it. As I pushed the cresset aside, pushed the panel inwards, Katerina motioned to the panel she was referring to, and twisted the cresset in a counterclockwise motion. Grignir braced his right shoulder against the walling, concentrating the force of his bulk against it. The slab gradually swung inward with a slight grating sound. Carthena stooped beneath Grignir's corded arms and crawled upon all fours into the passage beyond. Grignir followed after, easing the slab back into place. Winding before the pair was a dark, musty tunnel, exhibiting tangled spider webs from its ceiling to wall and an oozing, sickly slime running lazily upon its floor. Hanging from the chipped wall upon Grignir's right side was a half-mouldered corpse, its gray, flacking arms held in place by rusted iron manacles. Carthena flinched back into Grignir's arms at sight of the leering set in an ugly, distorted grimace, staring horribly at her from hollow, gaping sockets. This alcove must also be used by Agaphim as a torture chamber. I wonder how many of his enemies have disappeared into these haunts, never to be heard from again, pondered the hulking brute. Let us flee before we are also caught within Agaphim's ghastly clutches. The exit from this tunnel cannot be very far from here, said Carthena with a slight sob to her voice as she sagged in Grignir's encompassing embrace. Aye, it will be best to be finished with this corridor as soon as it is possible. But why do you flinch from the sight of death so? Mrift, you have seen much death this day without exhibiting such emotions, exclaimed Grignir as he led her trembling form along the dingy confines. The man hanging from the wall was Diantha. He'd committed the folly of showing affections for me in front of Agaphim. He never meant any harm by his actions. At this, Carthena broke into a slow, steady whimpering, choking her voice with gasping sobs. There was never anything between us, and yet Agaphim did this to him, the beast. May the demons of hell's deepest haunts claw away at his wretched flesh for this merciless act, she prayed. I detect that you felt more for this fellow than you wished to let on. But enough of this. We can talk of such matters after we are once more free to do so. With this, Grignir lifted the grieved female to her feet and strode onward down the corridor, supporting the bulk of her weight with his surging left arm. Presently, a dim light was perceptibly filtering into the tunnel, casting a dim reddish hue upon the moldy wall of the passage's grim confines. Carthena had ceased her whimpering and partially regained her composure. The tunnel's end must be nearing. Rays of sunlight are beginning to seep into. Grignr clamped his right hand over Carthina's mouth and with a slight struggle pulled her over to the shadows at the right-hand wall of the path, while at the same time thrusting this torch beneath an overhanging stone to smother its flickering rays. "Be silent. I can hear footfalls approaching through the tunnel," growled Grignr in a hushed tone. "All that you hear are the horses corralled at the far end of the tunnel. That is a further sign that we are nearing our goal," she stated. "All that you hear is less than I hear. I heard footsteps coming towards us. Silence yourself that we may find out whom we are being brought into contact with. I doubt that any would have thought as yet of searching this passage for us. The advantage of surprise will be upon our side," Grignr warned. Carthina cast her eyes downward and ceased any further pursuit towards conversation, an irritating habit in which she had gained an amazing proficiency. Two figures came into the pair's view from around a turn in the tunnel. They were clothed in rich, luxuriant silks and rambling on in conversation while ignorant of their crouching foes waiting in ambush ahead. We don't know who it is. "That barbarian dog is cringing beneath the weight of the lash at this very moment, sire. He shall cause no more disturbance." "Aye, and so it is with any who dare to cross the path of Sargon's chosen one," said the second man. "But the peasants are showing signs of growing unrest. They complain that they cannot feed their families while burdened with your taxes." "I shall teach those sluts the meaning of humility. Order an immediate increase upon their taxes. They dare to question my sovereign authority? Ha-ah! They shall soon learn what true oppression can be. I will—" A shadowed bulk leapt from behind a jutting promontory as it brought down a double-edged axe with the sped of striking thought. One of the nobles sagged lifeless to the ground, skull split to the teeth. Grignr gasped as he observed the bisected face set in its leering death agonies. It was Agafnd. The dead man's comrade, having recovered from his shock, drew a jewel-encrusted dagger from beneath the folds of his robe and lunged towards the barbarian's back. Grignr spun at the sound from behind and smashed down his crimsoned axe once more. His antagonist lunged, howling, to a stream of stagnant green water, grasping a spouting stump that had once been a wrist. Grignr raised his axe over his head and prepared to finish the incomplete job, but was deterred halfway through his lunge by a frenzied screech from behind. Carthina leapt to the head of the writhing figure, plunging a smoldering torch into the agonized face. The howls increased in their horrid intensity, stifled by the sizzling of roasting flesh, then died down until the man was reduced to a blubbering mass of squirming, insensate flesh. Grignr advanced to Carthina's side, wincing slightly from the putrid aroma of charred flesh that rose in a puff of thick white smog throughout the chamber. Carthina reeled slightly, staring dazedly downward at her gruesome handiwork. "I had to do it. It was Agafim. I had to," she exclaimed. "Sargon should be more careful of his right-hand men," added Grignr, a smug grin upon his lips. "But to hell with Sargon for now. The stench is becoming bothersome to me." With that, Grignr grasped Carthina around the waist, leading her around the bend in the cave and into the open. A ball of feral red was rising through the mists of the eastern horizon, dissipating the slinking shadows of the night. A corral stood before the pair, enclosing two grazing mares. Grignr reached into a weighted-down leather pouch dangling at his side and drew forth the scintillant red emerald he had obtained from the bloated idol. Raising it toward the sun, he said, "We shall do well with the bauble, eh?" Carthina gaped at the gem, gasping in a terrified manner. "The Eye of Argon! Oh, Kala!" At this, the gem gave off a blinding glow, then dribbled through Grignr's fingers into a slimy red ooze. Grignr stepped back, pushing Carthina behind him. The droplets of slime slowly converged into a pulsating jelly-like mass. A single opening transfixed the blob, forming into a leech-like maw. Then the hideous transgressor of nature flowed towards Grignr, a trail of greenish slime lingering behind it, the single gap puckered repeatedly, emitting a ghastly sucking sound. Grigner spread his legs into a battle stance, steeling his quivering thews for a battle royal with a thing he knew not how to fight. Carthena wound her arms about her protector's neck, mumbling, kill it, while her entire body trembled. The thing was almost upon Grigner when he buried his axe into the gristly maw. It passed through the blob and clanged upon the ground. Grigner drew his axe back with a film of yellow-green slime clinging to the blade. The thing was seemingly unaffected. Then it started to sluice up his leg. The hairs upon his nape stood out on end from the slimy feel of the thing's bully bulk. The nautious sucking sound became louder, and Grigner felt the blood being drawn from his body. With each hiss of hideous pucker, the thing increased in size. Grigner shook his foot about madly in an attempt to dislodge the blob, but it clung like a leech, still feeding upon his rapidly draining life fluid. He grasped with his hands, trying to rip it off, but only found his hands entangled in a sickly, glue-like substance. The slimy thing continued its puckering, now having grown the size of Grigner's leg from its vampiric feast. Grigner began to reel and stagger under the blob, his chalk-white face and faltering muscles attesting to the gigantic loss of blood. Carthena slipped from Grigner in a death-like faint, a morrow chilling scream upon her red, rubish lips. In final desperation, Grigner grasped the smoldering torch upon the ground and placed it into the reeking maw of the travesty. A shudder passed through the thing. Grigner felt the blackness closing upon his eyes, but he held on with the last ebb of his rapidly waning vitality. He could feel its grip lessening as a hideous gurgling sound erupted from the writhing maw. The jelly-like mass began to bubble like a vat of boiling tar as quavers passed up and down its entire form. With a sloshing plop, the thing fell to the ground, evaporating in a thick scarlet cloud until it reattained its original size. It remained thus for a moment, as the puckered maw took the shape of a protruding red eyeball, the pupil of which seemed to unravel before it the tale of creation. How a shapeless mass slithered from the quagmires of the stigmatic pool of time, only to degenerate into a leprosy of avaricious lust. In that fleeting moment, the grim mystery of life was revealed before Grigner's ensnared gaze. The eyeball's glare turned to a sudden plea of mercy, a plea for the whole of humanity. Then the blob began to quiver with violent convulsions. The eyeball shattered into 1,000 tiny fragments and evaporated in a curling wisp of scarlet mist. The very ground below the thing began to vibrate and swallow it up with a belch. The thing was gone forever. All that remained was a dark red blotch upon the face of the earth, blotching things up. Shaking his head, his shaggy mane to clear the jumbled fragments of his mind, Grigner tossed the limp female over his shoulder. Mounting one of the disgruntled mares and leading the other, the weary, scarred barbarian truded slowly off into the horizon to become a tiny pinpoint in a filtered field of swirling blue mists, leaving the nobles, soldiers, and peasants to replace the missing monarch. Long live the king! All right. Boy, so I have to admit, I feel like I got overhyped on this, where it's like, we dare you to read this without laughing. Maybe I've read too many bad stories. Because there was only a couple of times where it challenged me at all for me to be able to keep my composure. It did almost get me a couple of times, but nothing too crazy. I think really my takeaway for this is surprisingly like, boy, things never really change, do they? Because this reminds me so much of one story in particular that we read a couple years back called The Quilled Wolf. And I guess honestly, I think just by coincidence, a lot of the self-published amateur author books we read are written by women, but The Quilled Wolf was written by a man, and this one's written by a man, and I feel like they kind of share a lot of similarities. Um, it's very focused on like Dude, the barbarian is so hot, and his hair, he's so buff, and his hair is so nice. And all of the enemies in the story are so fat. And like we're gonna talk a lot about how fat they are. The gem becoming goop was kind of a cool twist. I didn't see that coming. And didn't really give us any kind of like closure. The other thing I think is strange is that like he rode into town, found a woman at a bar, started kissing up on her, and then there's this big confrontation, but she was like a fugitive on the run. And if you're a fugitive on the run, I don't know, I guess it could go either way, but it doesn't seem like you would be floozing it up with random strangers unless maybe you like felt like you needed someone around to protect you or something. Um lot of talk about really what everybody looks like. And even a couple of times there was one where they described the cultist where it's just like this really long list of like what they were wearing. I kind of want to, yeah, right here, this bit. Um, talks about their slippers like in excruciating detail, and their jewelry, and just like this whole paragraph pretty much is like, here's what the shaman look like, here's what they're dressed like. I really love that they use the word sleuzed right there at the end. That's a made up word I've never heard, but quite like. Then it started to sleuze up his leg. That's great. And there was, what else? I don't know, it's not terrible, it's also not interesting, it doesn't say anything, like, it's very, just an encounter, like a D&D encounter. Like, it doesn't seem like overarchingly the story has anything to say. There's no, like, takeaway, it's just like, dude was buff, touched some boobs. Oh yes, the saggy nipple. There was the sagging nipples. Pressed her sagging nipples against his. You should say how awesome Grigner is. Is Grigner awesome? I guess he is. He is pretty based. Where he was like, "Your leader sucks. Why don't you kill him?" Like that. That's what we would do. Almost. Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely. Yeah. The big-lipped priest. That's probably the most problematic line in the story. And the way it's written makes me think it's not even intentional. It's just really unfortunate. And then the zealotry thing, that's a funny detail. Is that something that they had, like, read? Yeah, it was. That's fair. It was written by a teenager. Yeah, you don't have to worry too much about artistic vision. It's, like, kind of an accomplishment just to, like, get a narrative written down and submitted somewhere. And be like, what does this all mean? It's like, what do you mean? What does it mean? I don't know, man. He's a cool guy. He does cool adventures. That's fair. And it is, yeah, pretty much just like, have you noticed how cool Grigner is? Yeah, that's exactly, yeah. So being inspired by stuff like this is actually, for me, like, they did this? They wrote, okay, damn, I feel like I'm not good enough to be a writer. These people are getting fucking published. Like, I can do better than this. That was pretty much the entire motivation behind the first new Next Best Last Dragon Whisperer. So I was reading other bad books, and it's like, these people wrote a whole trilogy of books. I could write a fucking... It's literally just put 60,000 or so mostly comprehensible words from one end to the other and say, here you go, here's the book. I wrote a whole book. Yeah, tons of adjectives. So many adjectives in this. I'm curious why they felt like why they wanted to have Carthena torch a guy in the face. It's like she'd not really done anything up to that point. It's like a sort of it was, but I don't think it was Agaphim, was it? Yeah, he chopped Agaphin's head in half. And she was like, it was Agaphim, I had to. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It was his buddy. And you like burned him in the face. Have you actually started writing a book? I finished writing a book. It's been written for years now. Whole thing's done. It's on my external hard drive somewhere around here. Yeah, I can put it up on the Discord again. I've sent it to some people before. Um, it's not like available anywhere. It's mostly fine. It's not good. It's weird. Um, and a few elements of it were actually I would stream while I wrote it, and people would come in and be like, "You should add this," and I'm like, "Yep, we're adding that. No problem." Although it's hard to parse where those things take place because I take so many like bizarre, like hard left turns for absolutely no reason. Um, it's also written like deliberately bad. It's not me just like blarking out like a bunch of words. I mean, it is that, but on top of that, it is me specifically leveraging some of the weird writing quirks I've seen in modern bad books. Like one thing that I see bad writers do frequently that I find very interesting is so they'll say like how do I describe it? What's a good example? They'll talk about objects or they'll talk about like phenomena as if they are intrinsic to God, it's so difficult to describe. Um like if like a meteor slammed down, they'd say like causing the vibrations in the ground to jump out and scatter for 100 miles. Um, like just the way that they like characterize like effects as objects is a thing that I've seen consistently. I'd have to go find some examples. Um, like the goosebumps in my arms started tingling or whatever. It's like, oh, are the goosebumps just always there and they were just waiting for this moment to come out and tingle? It's a very strange sort of weird thing I've seen more than one writer do. Um, and then there's one bad writer in particular that I was copying a lot of their stuff where it's like parts of their body will be they'll be like my mouth started smiling. I could feel my mouth starting to smile. Like that's kind of one of the like the what I mean is like they externalize some very odd things in the story. And then of course just characters are constantly like you know like the Rise of Heroes series. Yeah, the edges of my mouth began to curl into a smile is like not fantastic, but it is like a cogent sentence. Like I could feel my mouth's curls decide to smile, almost exactly like that. It's so hard to depict. Who knows? Maybe we'll do Rise of the Heroes. It's been long enough now that I don't think I care anymore. When we first found out about it, it was like a friend of a friend's relative was the one who wrote the books, and it was like, and we love them. It's like one of my favorite book series, totally sincerely. But like, we didn't want to like, you know, jump on it and like make fun of them when they were still very much like a part of everything that we were doing, like our lives or whatever. I didn't want to elevate that. Um, but at this point, I don't know. It's fine. It's not something. It's not like bad. Yeah, I don't know. I did like reading aloud. That's fun for me. Glad we decided to do that. Griegner's the only redhead. What is this? Is this the rat? The rat that he took its pelvis and sharpened it into a knife by hiding it in his loincloth? Full crappy graphic novel. Oh, that's kind of a big ask. I don't know. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't draw. So, yeah. I mean, poor writing and poor drawing, great, but like then there's also like the entire additional discipline of doing like sequential art and comic book composition. Yeah, I made comics when I was a kid too. I wish I was one of those people whose parents like have lived in the same house their entire lives, and I could go back and like, oh yeah, we've got all those little doodles you did from when you were 12. I don't remember almost any of it. The one thing I specifically for some reason remember is that at least one of my comic book characters was a guy who had two things that I can recall going for him. He and I don't know how these are powers or anything, but like, so first of all, he had um, one of these things going on where it's like a glass dome and like his brain is visible through it. And the other thing was that he had like telescoping mechanical arms that had just like basically as many segments as I wanted them to have. And despite this like completely horrifying Hellraiser Doom bad guy fucking anatomy, he was not just a hero, but he was the leader of a team of heroes. I think maybe they ended in like points like this. Just do like this. He basically looked like this. I don't remember what if he had powers at all. I have to assume that the brain cap thing is to imply that he's brilliant. You know, I think I tended to draw my people. Oh, so I had some kind of superhero creation system when I was a kid. I think it involved cards. Like it was an actual like TTRPG, like Marvel rule book, something something. Um, and I would use that to make characters that would never go on any actual TTRPG adventures because I wasn't on at that point yet where I had a bunch of friends who could understand participating in TTRPGs, but I could roll through all the menus, look through all the charts, like basically like build D&D characters, and then just be like, that's the character in my fiction. But I think most of them had this same template where they would kind of be looking like this. And usually I wouldn't draw their bodies at first. In their character profiles, they would all just look like this. And then, I don't remember how their faces looked at all. But that like standard like bust template is how I would draw all my characters. And then later on, if I needed to, I would draw like full bodies if they needed to have telescoping, pointy-handed octopus arms or whatever. All right, what time is it? Okay. Well, I guess I'm gonna get up again. What did I say we were gonna do today after we got done with this? Try and make Score Chasers music? Guess we can try and do that. I did already kind of technically try to make something. Yeah. All right. Give me 5 minutes and I'll come back in and boot up Ableton and all of that. Do we need? No, we don't need a commercial. Just go on break. Okay.
Yeah.
So, probably the wisest thing for us to do. Well, first let me show you what I already have. Where do I have it on the desktop? No, what did I do with it? The fuck did I do with it? No, there's definitely an export of this somewhere. Where would I have put that? Did I accidentally put it in here? No? Well, that's fine. We can just... Gosh, this does make me want to write. Seeing this is just like, just do... Oh. There we go. Alright, so this is what... It's loud. So this is what I have so far. Or this is like the draft that I did. And so on in a loop. I think what we might do well, what might serve us, is to go look up some like sports themes and kind of take notes on what we hear, what kind of things are common among them, and try to recreate that. So in my imagination, as you could tell here, there's like thick drums and brass. There's got to be brass. That's how you make a sports theme. And like honestly, this just by itself, not the worst thing in the world. I could just ship this and be like, we're good. Welcome back to Score Chasers. Who's gonna get the high score? Probably not you, because you suck at video games. Coming up next is Locomotive Rush. Stick around. Sponsored by a betting company of some kind. DraftKings. That's the one. That's what I was thinking of. Sports show anthems. What would you consider to be the most iconic sport arena? No. No, we want like television, just like we don't want anthems. That might be the wrong word. Sports show music. Oh, this guy's ranking the best theme songs in sports.
Here's Brody Brazil.
Shut up.
Here of a full-scale orchestra recording some type of ensemble there, but that's that are made to last the test of time, right? A good theme can instantly.
It's questionably tied to the. Yeah, less visually. Yeah, but like, what instruments is it using? Come on, man.
Crescendos to an ultimate conclusion. I mean, You got to do that, right?
That's pretty good. And is that horns? That's horns, right?
I mean, you got to do that, right? And this one's coming back.
And that's just doing chat, 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 chat.
What's next here?
Yeah, this is what I think of when I think of a fucking sports theme. Heavy on the
Doing
brass.
the drums. This one's been around for a while.
So that's got the galloping thing that I used in, like, well, sort of used in, which is funny because when I was writing the main song for Hazelnut Junction, I thought to myself, like, what does a train do? Okay, a train goes, but that's like a galloping thing, and that's not actually what trains do. Trains, I think, actually, the train rhythm is usually probably with a shaker. It's chicka 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 chicka. So it's like hard, soft, medium, soft, hard, soft, medium, soft, but on every single beat, chicka 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 chicka. And instead, I wrote it as ticka-da, 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 which still works. It's still very much like a driving rhythm, but it's not the quote-unquote correct one. And I think I fucked up there, or could have gotten something else out of it. But yeah, when I think of sports themes, this is the one that I think of, is the NFL one.
What's next here?
And they have the crowd cheer. Is that part of the song?
I was doing the drums. This one's been around for a while.
And again, it's just horns and drums. It's going ticka-ta, 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 and then just some brass. It's like, and that's all it is. I don't think there's anything else to it.
And by the way, you're noticing that I'm putting some crowd music with those theme songs.
Oh, you're doing that.
Copyright issues here on YouTube.
Oh.
And look, I'm not doing this to steal their songs. I'm not trying to get anything out of that. I'm critiquing the songs here.
Do you have anything
evaluating
meaningful
these.
to
So,
say about
some
the
crowd
songs?
music
Are you a
behind the
musician?
the copyright
Or are you a
situation was
sports
good here
guy?
on YouTube. That's what that's all about. But that one, I think, when Fox got into the broadcasting business of NFL games in the 90s, was it late 80s, early 90s, right? A couple decades, everybody knows this song. It hits, right? It feels like Sunday morning. It feels like Sunday afternoon when you hear that song. All of these songs.
Man,
bring
you don't know
to
dick
I feel
about
like a time
shit.
and a place, not just a game. Next here, let's see. You know how this
No.
ends.
Okay, hardcore electric guitar. I guess we could give it a shot. I don't think it's super valuable, but we could try. We could try. I'll put like hardcore classic electric guitar. That would be a good excuse for me to bust out / sloppily play the electric guitar, which I do have the capacity for now with the Scarlett and the DAW and everything. I actually bought new strings for my electric shortly after I got the Scarlett, and I have barely fucked around with it. All right, well, we got NHL on ESPN. It might be better to do a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 like a 6/8 kind of thing. But again, this one sounds like it's just basically drums and like brass lead.
And it keeps going, right? Like I want to do the next part. And Another ESPN one. Well, ABC ESPN.
Yeah, this is another extremely classic sports theme.
Here's the best part.
Yeah, it's drums and brass. That's literally all it is. All of these sports themes are just like drums and brass, or drums and some kind of like extremely strong lead. The like electric guitar is also okay. So I'm feeling pretty good about my intuition on that at this point. Is there something? I wonder if we can get a better. Let's try. See if we can get like some timpani into, or some kind of like percussion, tuned percussion. No, we just want percussion, I think. Something like that. And then here we can do horns, or we can do, I didn't realize there was all these other horn sections I haven't fucked with. So which one was I using before? I think I was using horns A4. Yep. So we want probably like a trumpet lead, right? And then what? I bet I can even find like a key. Most inspiring musical key. D, G, and C. Okay, those are all. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So D is like. Okay. Get out of here. I guess I don't even really need this up anymore, do I? Staccato, though, better, maybe? Ba-na-na-na-na. Bum, 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 bum. Ba-na-na-na-na-na. Diddle-la-diddle-la. What else? Shit, I should have kept that open for longer. There's more we could have unpacked from that, I think. Shit. No, no, no. Let's see. Making sports music. Do 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 do.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Kevin.
Whoops.
Hey, what's up? Alternative melody. So go off of.
She's kind of. Oh, he's using strings and drums. This also, honestly, to me sounds more like a COD lobby fucking music loop than a sports theme. But hey, maybe he'll turn it around later on.
So for this section, editing, they have more to work. All right.
It's so like chill.
Introducing, but now bring the string.
Some strings. Maybe. Let's see if we, let's try some strings over here. Violins 1. Okay. No, I think it's in, we're going to do it in 4/4. This is not terrible. I don't love it, but like... That's better, actually. God damn it. That could work. It could work. Do we hate that? Probably if I added some shit. Wait, what is wrong with this shit? Did I do something weird here that makes it... It doesn't hit right. This one still feels better. Neither of them feel great. This one's better, but I think maybe it doesn't move around enough. I think a lot of these bigger orchestral things kind of do like a lot of different movement. They don't do like a groove. They kind of like go all over the place. Fake Zelda. Zelda from Wish.com. It's like too happy. It's happier than I want. Maybe what did I Google to get the keys that they were like try D major? Cuz that is not working for me. I think maybe that might be part of the issue. Cuz already when I move it up like here. Yeehaw. The strings sound like fucking cowboy stagecoach music to me. That's stadium music. Dum 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 dum. You know, doesn't that sound way more right? It just sounds better. It just sounds better. Sure, that's actually fine. Not what I meant to do, but actually fine. Things that they're doing that I'm not doing is having a lot of like really advanced orchestral sort of complements to their otherwise, because like it's not enough to have a single horn either. It has to be like a chorus of horns. even any notes down there. Maybe I should just approach it with just multiple horns, and like I would another song where it's like, this is the bass horns and this other one is the lead horns. So it would just go like, and that would be that like undertone, and then I could do the like, just be like that. And then I guess we need a second, fucking second horns down here. Trumpets? Horns? Just horns? Okay, actually we're gonna move this down. And this, we're gonna use this one for the bass. Bring it down an octave. I mean, bring it back up an octave. No, this note is wrong because I always play my notes early. No, the opposite of that. Come on. Windy and soundtracky. It's not anthemic. Like, this is not good, but it is like anthemic. I could let it loop during breaks and just be like, it's sports. Am I not gonna find something better than this? This is just what we're doing. But video games. Maybe we could do a bunch of voiceovers. Sponsored by G Fuel. Yeah, I think I might be a little bit over it, trying to get it to work in a more expanded way. I don't know, I'd be interested in talking to like Bora about how they would approach this problem. Chasers, go ahead and take a break, take a load off while we fill back up our magazines that go in the bottom of our controllers, which is the batteries. Keyboard and mouse, that's for PC people, which also we are, so good job with that. Haha. a second. I just go with this if there's no objections from the Scorchers. I mean, they can't stop me, right? They're like, host it, do the stream however you want. Like, this is the song. Like it or, don't ask me to volunteer for things. Which is a great working relationship attitude to have, right? Maybe I can kind of like fade it in a little bit. Isn't that like pretty easy to do here? Yeah, wait. There, I saw it. Yeah. That's the thing. No, not that. That's... How did I do it before? It was so easy. It's like so easy to do. Fading in and out. I could have sworn. Maybe that was in DaVinci, that it just had the little like grabbers. And you could just like fucking pinch it down and be like, yeah, start at 0 and just go here. I'm sure it exists in Ableton, I just don't know where it is. Okay, I'm gonna get up. And then, I guess we can try and make some, like, voice lines for Score Chasers or something. I don't fucking know. I ain't got no plan today. Oh, there's only like half an hour left anyway. Okay, I'll be right back. what we should do is zoom way out. Take this and make it like 1,000,000 miles long. And then, how do we get back to the beginning? Home? Yeah. Wait, why didn't it get... Okay, I guess it did. And let's double it one more time. Okay. Oh wait, now it's fully... How long? How long is this? Where's my, like, timestamp? I've never figured that out in Ableton. 499 bars at 197 BPM. But how much, like, time is that? I guess it doesn't matter. So what we're gonna do is just try and make some, like, goof-ass vocal overlay. And then I can run this during, like, breaks and stuff. And so we're gonna do, like, where am I going? You're watching Score Chasers, sponsored by Brainoid Games. How does your brain look like? And Pagorli, get your fill. Score Chasers is made possible by... Wait, fucking what is Pomo's dev, like, splash thing called? Fuck. Score Chasers is made possible by Keyboard Cowboys. Yeehaw! I guess I could just put their thing in. Up next, video games. You're watching Score Chasers. Thursday nights, Score run away from... No, God. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, Score Fleers. You're watching Score Chasers, brought to you thanks to the contributions of viewers like you. Score Chasers is sponsored by Bad Cop. Like a cop, but bad. Score Chasers, brought to you in part by Little Doctor Games. Pulsar Crash, out now. No, it's not out now. Score Chasers, brought to you in part by Little Doctor Games. Pulsar Crash demo, out now. Use code Little Doctor to tell them you like it. Yeah, it's like not good sports music, but it's fine. It's fine. No, don't overdub it. Start here. Score Chasers is partnered with Score Chasers is partnered with Down to Jam to bring you a Down to Jam Score Chasers experience like you've never felt before. Chase scores. So stupid. I need like the Down to Jam site up to remember who else is here. Score Chasers is brought to you by... Boats and I never came up with like a cool dev team name, and Boats doesn't have like his own like studio name. What the fuck was the thing called in Locomotive? Now I have to like look it up. Delicate wet mouse sounds ASMR. I needed wet sounds. Don't ask. King Pomo Games. Score Chasers, sponsored by King Pomo Games. Right now, 20% off King Pomo Games. Score Chasers is brought to you in part by Gnomable. Gnomable, how gnome are you? I'm wasting a lot of record time running, just like looking at these. Who else is in here? I wish I knew specifically which games were going to be in Score Chasers. Maybe I can find out on Discord. Yeah, no problem. I mean, have a good night. We'll be back tomorrow at special request. We'll be playing through the Ludum Dare games of Tato Judaican, something like that. It's not that one. So, Taro Pulkinen. So some kind of, they have their own engine dev person. I'm very curious. Bad Cop brought it to our attention. So see, there they are. There's the things. This is what I remember seeing. See, they do exist. We can like, yeah. So yeah, tomorrow, normal time, 6 to 9, we'll be here if you want to come around. And then Score Chasers is gonna be Thursday. Ludum Dare, obviously, across the weekend, such as I can contribute to something. And then I don't know. I could easily make Saturday or Sunday like read out loud day. I've got a shelf of books, and we could definitely get our hands on more. It's easy content, and if y'all enjoy it, I certainly do. Do we know what games specifically are going to be run in Score Chasers at Pomo specifically? It's a marathon. We all play each of the selected games. We'd all meet up in channel. Someone would say which game, and then after 20 minutes, yep. Everyone in Discord channel sharing their screen. Oh, so they're gonna pick just like on the fucking fly. Great, cool. Which games do I see most realistically actually having like a high score run to them? Locomotive Rush will probably be one. I wouldn't be surprised if our game ends up being one. Even the broken one is like kind of fun to score chase. I don't think Road Train has score. Jive Train will probably end up being one. Fregston will be one. Tickets, please, possibly. Did Aaron's team have a name for their team? Redshift Game Dev? Is that okay? Redshift is when you go away from something at part of the speed of light, right? Oh my god, you can see my ratings. That's so embarrassing. Score Chasers, brought to you in part by Redshift Game Dev. Do you want to go away from something at a fraction of the speed of light? Redshift Game Dev. Score Chasers, sponsored by a powder that makes you have muscles and it tastes like chocolate. Chasers has been chasing scores since 1997, and we're not about to stop now, so get in here for the best of the best. Score chasing. Oh, can I get like an echoey sort of reverb to key in and out? What do we Probably just an echo, right? Some kind of echo. No, it's too slow. How about this one? Yeah, that's... Oh, it's very king. Ultimate. Yeah, that's... Okay, it's not bad. Okay. Up. This might actually be fine. Score Chasers is brought to you in part by Ultimate Dickball. Subscribe now to Ultimate Dickball to get a full package. Full package. Yeah. Score Chasers is brought to you in part from contributions from viewers like you. Score Chasers is a proud partner of sports betting. You can lose all of your money anytime you want by doing some sports betting. You could lay down and take a nice nap in the big soft pile of sports betting. Chasers is generously sponsored by a powder that makes your ass itch less. Are you a man with a sweaty ass, especially in the middle part of it? Well, you can use this special powder that makes you not have a sweaty ass. Score Chasers, today and only today, is sponsored by a limited time offer of tacos from Taco Bell. Taco Bell, the cheapest, worst restaurant that you could possibly be eating at for fast food. Taco Bell sucks. Score Chasers is sponsored by the Eye of Argon. Watch as Carathan breasts boobily, and you make it out of a dungeon, and the gem you stole turns to goo. Eye of Argon available now for free. Free. It's a book. Look it up. Score Chasers is made possible in part by a sponsorship with The Bad Controller. The Bad Controller. The Bad Controller. Give it to your friend when they come over. Give it to your cousin that you don't like. Give it to your little sister or brother. The Bad Controller. The buttons don't work. Sometimes this joystick drifts, and there's nothing you can do about that, and you're certainly not going to replace it. Score Chasers is made possible by a grant from the Wet Foundation. What do they do? Why are they here? Why are they so wet? The Wet Foundation. Alright, I think we're good. I think we're good for today. Are any of these actually good? I think the very, very first one might be kind of okay. You're watching Score Chasers, sponsored by Brainoid Games. How does your brain look like? And Pagorli, get your fill. Score Chasers is made possible by... Wait, fucking what is Pomo's dev, like, splat? Score Chasers is made possible by Keyboard Cowboys. Yeehaw! I guess I could just put... Up next, video games. You're watching Score Chasers. I don't know how to just record automation. Echo fuzz device on. I guess I could just put their thing in. Score Chasers is made possible by Keyboard Cow. You're watching Score Chasers, sponsored by Brainoid Games. How does your brain look like? And Pagorli. You're watching Score Chasers, sponsored by Brainoid Games. How does your brain look like? And Pagorli, get your fill. 6 p.m. Pacific. Score Fleers. You're watching Score Chasers, brought to you thanks to the contributions of viewers like you. Score Chasers is sponsored by Bad Cop, Like a Cop. Score Chasers brought to you in part by Little Doctor Games. Pulsar Crash out now. No, it's not out now. Score Chasers brought to you in part by Little Doctor Games. Pulsar Crash demo out now. Use code Little Doctor to tell them you like it. Score Chasers is partnered with Down to Jam to bring you a Down to Jam Score Chasers experience like you have never felt before. Chase scores. Score Chasers, sponsored by King Pomo Games. Right now, 20% off King Pomo Games. Score Chasers, sponsored by King Pomo Games. Right now, 20% off King Pomo Games. Score Chasers is brought to you in part by Gnomable. Gnomable, how gnome are you? Score Chasers is brought to you in part by Gnomable. Gnomable, how gnome are you? Score Chasers brought to you in part by Redshift Game Dev. Do you want to go away from something at a fraction of the speed of light? Redshift Game. Score Chasers brought to you in part by Redshift Game Dev. Do you want to go away from something at a fraction of the speed of light? Redshift Game Dev. The echo fuzz does a ton to actually make it kind of like more goofy. Whoa, we're doing the thing. Blah, blah, blah. We can keep running on this. I might do some like in the back end. I also have to do some fucking video editing tomorrow. I think tomorrow is my last relax and don't work hard day. I told myself I would just do not a lot in March. And I've still done some, so can we imagine what April will bring? I'm going to take off for the night, and then tomorrow we will work on the games of Tito Jolpunen, or whatever their name was. I already don't remember. That'll be fun. I've been actually looking forward to the idea of, like, doing... like running through like one specific dev's like body of work, usually for like broadly positive reasons, but I guess Tato, we don't know anything about it yet. Whoa. Wait, what just happened? Why did I get... What? Why is this? Oh, I happened to click into a part where the echo fuzz was going. Alright, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and I'll see you tomorrow.
That's the end of the show. All of us have got to go back on home. I hope you had a lot of fun. We'll catch you at the next one, or whenever we do at